I'm a guy who thought he had a pretty decent life. My name is Mike, and I've been married to Sarah for the last 7 years. We met during college. She was the popular girl with a magnetic smile, and I was the shy guy who managed to charm her with my awkward jokes. For a long time, our relationship felt like a fairy tale. We shared dreams, built our lives together, and said, "I love you" more times than I could count. But over the last year, things changed. Sarah started talking about finding herself. At first, I thought it was just a phase, some self-help nonsense she picked up from a podcast or a book she was reading. I supported her, encouraged her to explore new interests, and even suggested we take a trip together to reconnect. Instead, she seemed to drift further away. She began spending more time with her friends, going out late, and returning home with vague stories about how she was discovering new passions. I was left feeling like an outsider in my own life, questioning if I was doing something wrong. The signs were subtle at first. She'd come home smelling different, like perfume I didn't recognize. Her late nights became more frequent and her phone usage increased. I'd catch glimpses of her texting, the screen lighting up with names I didn't recognize. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, Sarah was my wife. She wouldn't betray me, right? One afternoon, I came home early from work. I was excited to surprise her, maybe order in some takeout, and just enjoy a quiet evening together. But when I walked in, the house was empty. I noticed her phone lying on the counter unlocked. Curiosity got the best of me, and I glanced at her messages. My heart sank as I read the flirty thread with a guy named Jake, someone I later learned was a friend she'd been hanging out with more often than I realized. The messages were explicit and filled with promises to meet up. They talked about their sex life in a way that made my stomach churn. It was like a punch in the gut, my world spiraling out of control. In that moment, everything changed. The disbelief was overwhelming, but the anger quickly took over. I felt sick, betrayed by the person I trusted most. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the living room, my mind racing with thoughts. Was I really going to confront her with this? What would I say? I wanted to scream, to throw her phone against the wall, to make her feel the pain she was causing me. Instead, I waited. When Sarah finally came home, she was bubbly and carefree, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. She asked about my day, and I could barely manage a response. I felt like a volcano ready to erupt. After a few minutes of small talk, I couldn't hold back any longer. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. Her face changed instantly, the smile fading. She knew something was off. I pulled her phone from my pocket, showing her the messages and watching as her eyes widened in horror and guilt. "What the hell is this, Sarah?" I demanded, my heart racing. Her reactions were a mix of panic and defiance. "Mike, I can explain," she stammered, her voice shaky. "It's not what it looks like. I was just what, finding yourself?" I cut in, anger boiling. I listened as she spun a web of excuses, claiming it was just a flirtation, that she was confused and feeling lost in her life. I wanted to shout, "You don't cheat on someone you love because you're confused." But instead, I stood there, feeling the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me. In that moment, I realized I was dealing with two things: the woman I loved and a stranger who had broken my heart. All the dreams we shared felt like dust in the wind, and somewhere inside me, a decision started to form. I wouldn't let this define me, and I wouldn't let her lies take away my peace. But the pain was still fresh, and I knew I had a long road ahead. The confrontation had awakened something within me, a fire fueled by betrayal, and as I looked into her eyes, I was determined to figure out what to do next. In the aftermath of that confrontation, the atmosphere in our house felt thick and suffocating. Sarah's desperate attempts to justify her actions fell flat, and even though I could see the fear and regret swirling in her eyes, I could shake the feeling of betrayal that gripped me. I had trusted her completely, and now I was left with this gaping wound that felt impossible to heal. For the next few days, we walked around each other like ghosts, existing in the same space but living in different worlds. Sarah tried to initiate conversations, wanting to talk things through, but I was in no mood for discussions that felt more like rehearsed apologies than genuine remorse. Every time she reached out, I felt a wave of anger rise within me. I just wanted to scream. Instead, I opted for silence, retreating to the spare bedroom where I could collect my thoughts without her hovering presence. The reality of the situation began to sink in slowly. I started doing research, reading articles, joining forums, seeking advice from others who had experienced infidelity. I wanted to understand why people cheat and how I could navigate my emotions. There was an overwhelming sense of betrayal that resonated with every story I read. It didn't matter how many times I read about the same feelings of despair and anger. It felt surreal to know I was now one of those stories. In the midst of all this, I began to strategize my next moves. I thought about my options, what it would look like to confront Sarah again, to lay out a plan for how I wanted to proceed. But I also thought about revenge, about making her feel the way she had made me feel. It wasn't a healthy thought, but in those dark moments of despair, it felt like the only thing that could restore my sense of control. That weekend, Sarah went out with some friends, claiming she needed to get out of her head. I watched her leave, feeling a mix of anger and relief. I had time to think and plan without her constant presence. As the hours passed, I decided not to wait for her to return. I called my friend Mark, a guy I had known since college who had always been there to lend an ear. "Hey man," I said when he answered. "I need to talk." We met at a bar and I laid everything out on the table: the betrayal, the confrontation, Sarah's excuses. Mark listened intently, shaking his head in disbelief. "Dude, she's a piece of work. You deserve better than this," he said. "Have you thought about what you want to do? I mean, really do." His words hit home. I had been caught in the whirlwind of emotions, but now I needed clarity. I realized I didn't want to be a victim of this situation. I wanted to reclaim my power, and that started with a plan. "Revenge," I murmured almost to myself. Mark raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, the idea taking shape in my mind. "I want her to feel the consequences of her actions. She broke our trust, our vows. I think she needs to understand what she's lost." Mark nodded slowly, considering my words. "Just be careful, Mike. You don't want to lose yourself in this. It's easy to get caught up in revenge and forget what you really want." I appreciated the warning, but part of me felt empowered by the thought of revenge. I wanted to make her feel the way I felt: hurt, betrayed, and lost. The idea took root, and I began crafting a plan in my mind, a way to show her that actions have consequences. That night, Sarah returned home, her face flushed with excitement from her night out. She tried to engage me in small talk, but I kept my responses short and curt, maintaining my distance. I felt a thrill of anticipation at the idea of putting my plan into motion. If she thought she could betray me without repercussions, she was in for a rude awakening. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously executed my plan. I reached out to a couple of my old friends from college who knew Sarah, one she hadn't kept in touch with, deliberately creating scenarios where she could run into them. I shared snippets of our conversations, painting a picture of a man who was no longer the naive husband she could walk all over. The goal was to make her question her choices, to create doubt in her mind about what she had lost in me. Each encounter was like a piece of a puzzle falling into place, and with every interaction I felt a sense of satisfaction. It was as if I was taking back the power she had stolen from me. I watched as she grappled with her guilt and confusion. It was intoxicating, but I knew I couldn't lose sight of the bigger picture. I needed to balance my emotions with the reality of what was happening. As the days turned into weeks, I started to notice a change in Sarah. She became quieter, more withdrawn. The carefree laugh I had fallen in love with was replaced by a shadow of uncertainty. It was working, and while part of me felt vindicated, another part of me began to question how far I was willing to go with this. Was revenge really what I wanted, or was I just trying to navigate my pain? I had to admit, there was a toxic thrill in seeing her squirm, but I didn't want to lose myself in this dark rabbit hole. I was on a precarious ledge, balancing anger and a desire for closure. I needed to find a way to move forward, whether that included Sarah or not, but for now, I was enjoying the unfolding drama. I had set the stage, and now I was just waiting for the climax to play out. As I delved deeper into my plan, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, but I was becoming increasingly aware of the toll it was taking on my mental well-being. The initial satisfaction of watching Sarah squirm had transformed into a complicated mixture of guilt and exhilaration. I realized I was walking a fine line between reclaiming my power and losing sight of who I was. One evening, I decided to confront her again. I had taken my time, letting the tension build, and I could see the effects of my actions weighing heavily on her. She was quieter at the dinner table, her laughter absent, and when she spoke, it was as if she were treading carefully around a minefield. I knew that she was aware of her mistakes, but I wanted her to truly grasp the gravity of what she had done. "Sarah," I said, my tone carefully measured, "we need to talk." She looked up, eyes wide with apprehension. "Is this about what happened?" Her voice was shaky, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Yes, it is. I need you to understand that what you did was absolutely unacceptable," I replied, watching her bristle at my words. She opened her mouth, probably to defend herself. But I held up my hand. "No, I don't want to hear your excuses. You had an affair, and that's a betrayal of everything we built together. You talked about finding yourself, but what you really found was someone else to share your bed." Her expression shifted, a mix of defensiveness and vulnerability. "Mike, I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused. I thought I needed space, and instead you ran into someone else's arms," I cut in. "Say you're confused, but let me tell you something. In that confusion, it was your choice. No one forced you to cheat. You made that decision knowing it would hurt me, yet you did it anyway." The tension in the room was palpable, and I could see her fighting for the right words. "I know I messed up. I can't change what I did, but I want to make it right. I want to fix this." "Fix this?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think you can just wave a magic wand and everything will go back to normal? You shattered my trust. You don't get to just say sorry and expect me to forget." "It happened." She looked genuinely hurt, and for a split second I felt a pang of guilt. But then I reminded myself of all the nights I spent alone, wondering what she was doing and who she was with. I couldn't let that pain be overshadowed by her sorrow. "I can't just pretend this didn't happen, Sarah. I need time to think about what I want, what I deserve," I said, my voice firm. "You need to understand that your actions have consequences, and I won't be the same person I was before this." I watched as she processed my words, the realization settling in. "What are you saying? Are you saying you want to end this?" "I'm saying I don't know yet," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I need to figure out if I can ever trust you again. I need to figure out whether I want to fight for this or walk away." The look on her face was a mix of desperation and regret, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her facade. She was losing control of the situation, and it felt good, too good. In fact, but part of me was still battling the guilt of wanting to see her suffer as I had. "Please, Mike," she pleaded. "I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to work on this. Can't we go to therapy? Can't we try to rebuild?" The notion of therapy had crossed my mind, but I wasn't ready to make that leap yet. "I'm not sure I'm ready for therapy. I'm not sure I'm ready for anything. You need to understand that I'm hurt, and it's going to take a lot more than words to make this right." With that, I walked away, leaving her sitting at the dining table, her hands clasped tightly together. I felt a sense of empowerment at having taken control of the conversation, but I also felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I had put a chink in her armor, but was it enough to heal my own wounds? As the days went by, I continued to play my game of revenge while grappling with my own feelings. I noticed Sarah becoming more proactive, but not in the way I expected. Instead of being contrite, she became defensive, reaching out to her friends for support. I watched her as she sought validation from others, trying to cover up her guilt with social outings and distractions. It was almost as if she was trying to convince herself and me that she was fine, that I could just get over it. I found it fascinating and infuriating at the same time. She put on a mask of confidence, posting on social media about her self-discovery journey as if nothing had happened. It made my blood boil. I couldn't believe she could move on so easily while I was still grappling with the fallout. I turned to Mark again, seeking advice. "She's acting like everything is fine. I vented over drinks one night. It's like she's trying to convince me that nothing happened and it's driving me insane. Mark leaned back, considering my words. Maybe she's trying to cope in her own way, but it sounds like you're still angry and that's okay. You need to focus on what you want, not what she's doing. Easier said than done. I shot back, feeling the weight of my own emotions. I want her to feel the pain I feel, but I also want to move on. I don't want to be stuck in this cycle of anger and resentment. Then figure out what moving on looks like for you, Mark advised. Focus on yourself, your needs. If she truly wants to make things right, she'll have to recognize the damage she's caused. That night, I began to sketch out a plan. I didn't want to be the angry husband forever, and I didn't want to lose myself in revenge. I needed to find a way to redefine my life with or without Sarah. It was time to shift the focus from her actions to my healing process. As I lay in bed that night, I started to envision a future beyond the pain. Maybe it wouldn't be with Sarah. Maybe it would be about embracing life again, about rediscovering my own passions. I wanted to reclaim my happiness, and I realized that it was okay to prioritize myself for once. No matter what happened next, I needed to take control of my life. I drifted off to sleep, a sense of determination washing over me. I was done being a victim. I would become the architect of my own future, and if that meant leaving Sarah behind, then so be it. I was ready to take the next step. After coming to that realization, I entered a new phase of my life. It was a phase I would call self-discovery, and I approached it with a newfound determination and clarity. I started focusing on myself, something I hadn't done in what felt like an eternity. I signed up for a boxing class, something I had always wanted to try but had put off for the sake of Sarah's interests. I also rekindled friendships that had faded over the years, reaching out to old pals and even making new ones at the gym. I learned to channel my anger into something productive, trading my rage for sweat and adrenaline. Each punch felt like I was hitting back at the betrayal, and every drop of sweat was a release of the pent-up frustrations that had consumed me. The rhythmic sound of fists meeting bags became a sort of therapy, a way to reclaim my strength. I felt empowered, and for the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. But as I began to rebuild myself, I could ignore Sarah's attempts to reach out. She was persistent, calling and texting, asking if we could talk. Some days I felt the pull to engage, to perhaps give her another chance. Other days I relished in my newfound independence and the freedom that came with it, enjoying the absence of her guilt-laden presence. One rainy evening, I returned home after a particularly tough boxing session, feeling exhilarated and exhausted. As I entered the house, I noticed Sarah sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. My heart sank. I had hoped for space, but now it seemed she had made herself comfortable in my absence. "Hey," I said cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Mike, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was to come. "About what?" I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "About us," she said, looking down at the floor. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I want to take responsibility for what I've done. I want to make things right. I miss you." Her words hit me hard, stirring feelings I had tried to bury. I wanted to believe her sincerity, but I also knew I had to protect my heart. "Miss me, or miss what we had?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. "Both," she whispered, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "I know I messed up, and I've been reflecting on how I hurt you. I want to go to therapy together. I want to work on us." I paused, weighing my options. Part of me was still angry and hurt, while another part was intrigued by the possibility of healing. "Therapy. You didn't seem to want that before," I replied, unable to let go of my skepticism. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. I see now how much I took for granted. You've changed, and I realize I need to grow and change too." There was a vulnerability in her words that tugged at my heartstrings, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she had shattered my trust. "I'm not going to just forgive and forget, Sarah. You need to understand that this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. You broke me, and it's going to take time to rebuild." "I get that," she replied, her voice earnest. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll work hard to show you that I'm serious about making this right." The sincerity in her voice surprised me. Part of me wanted to say yes to give us another chance, but the other part, the more cautious side, was hesitant. I had dedicated so much time to my own healing and rediscovery, and I didn't want to jeopardize that by jumping back into the same toxic cycle. "I'll consider it," I finally said, my voice cautioning her that I wasn't making any promises. "But I need time. I can't just flip a switch and go back to the way things were." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her face, but I could see the uncertainty lurking in her eyes. "I understand. Just know that I'm committed to showing you I can change." As she left the living room, I felt a mix of emotions: confusion, hope, and fear. I had spent weeks focusing on myself and envisioning a future that didn't include her, but now the possibility of reconciliation hung in the air. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to set ground rules, establish boundaries if we were going to move forward together. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I discussed my feelings with Mark, who had been my sounding board throughout this ordeal. "You're in a tough spot, man," he said, leaning back in his chair at the bar. "On one hand, you've got a chance to rebuild something, but on the other hand, you need to protect yourself. You've already been through hell." "I don't want to get burned again," I admitted. "But what if she really means it? What if she's genuinely trying to change?" Mark shrugged. "That's the gamble, isn't it? You have to decide if you believe her words or if they're just empty promises. Trust is built over time, not given freely." With Mark's advice echoing in my mind, I decided to set boundaries. If we were going to try to rebuild our relationship, I needed her to understand that I was no longer the same person. I was no longer the passive husband who would overlook her mistakes. I had found my voice and I would use it. I drafted an email, listing out my thoughts and expectations. I made it clear that if we were going to consider therapy, she would need to be honest and transparent about her feelings, and I would need time to process what had happened. I also emphasized that she needed to understand the importance of rebuilding trust. It wouldn't happen overnight, and she would need to show consistent effort. After sending the email, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had taken control of the situation, and I was setting the tone for how I wanted things to unfold. Now it was up to her to respond and show me that she was serious about making amends. Days turned into weeks, and I watched as Sarah began to change. She came home with flowers, little gestures of affection that felt like attempts to make up for her past mistakes. We began discussing therapy, and she started opening up about her feelings. I could see the effort she was making, and while it was tempting to let my guard down, I reminded myself to tread carefully. I had to stay focused on my own healing journey, regardless of what happened next. With every passing day, I felt stronger and more in control. Whether I chose to forgive her or not, I was learning more about myself than I ever thought possible. I was reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my peace, one step at a time. As the weeks rolled on, the days felt like a delicate balance of rebuilding and rediscovering. I was learning to navigate this unfamiliar territory, one where I was both the betrayed husband and an emerging individual with goals and desires of my own. Sarah was making a concerted effort to demonstrate her commitment to change, and I was cautiously watching for signs of sincerity. At first, the small gestures felt hollow: a bouquet of flowers here, a sweet note left on my pillow there. But gradually, I began to see a shift in her. We signed up for couples therapy, a step neither of us had ever imagined we'd take. Walking into the therapist's office, I felt the weight of our past hanging between us like an uninvited guest. Would this really help? Could we truly heal from the fractures in our relationship? The first few sessions were awkward, like stepping onto a tightrope. Sarah opened up about her feelings of inadequacy and the pressure she felt to conform to our life together. I listened, both intrigued and frustrated. I wanted to understand her perspective, but it was difficult to reconcile her feelings with the reality of her actions. The therapist guided the discussions, encouraging us to express our emotions in a safe space. During one session, Sarah broke down, tears flowing as she recounted how she had lost herself over the years. "I thought losing myself would help me find something better, but instead I just lost you," she sobbed, her voice cracking. I regret everything and I don't know how to fix it. I just want my husband back. Hearing her vulnerability struck a chord within me, yet it wasn't an instant eraser for the pain I had endured. I felt the anger bubbling beneath the surface and I knew I had to express it. You say you want me back, but how do I know this isn't just a fleeting moment? How can I trust you again? I asked, my voice steady but laced with frustration. I understand why. You'd feel that way, she replied, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of sorrow and determination. I know I broke your trust and I'm willing to work for it, to show you that I'm committed to this marriage. I don't want to lose you, Mike. Each therapy session was a mixed bag of emotions, progress intertwined with painful reminders of the past. I was beginning to grasp that healing would be a long journey, one where patience and trust would need to be rebuilt brick by brick. I felt encouraged by her efforts, but there was still a part of me that hesitated. I didn't want to rush back into a relationship built on broken promises. Outside of therapy, I continued my boxing classes and made time for friends. Mark was a constant source of support, joining me for drinks or hitting the gym together. During one of our evenings out, he leaned in and said, "You seem different, man, like you're finding your footing again. Just don't lose sight of what you really want." His words resonated with me. I was rediscovering my own identity, and while part of me still cared for Sarah, I could ignore the reality of what had transpired. I needed to be honest with myself. Could I truly forgive her? Could I trust her again? The questions looped through my mind like a never-ending cycle. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, I returned home to find Sarah waiting for me on the couch, a nervous look on her face. "Mike, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft. "Sure," I replied, bracing myself for what was to come. "I know I've made mistakes and I'm still trying to figure out how to make it right," she said, biting her lip. "But I want you to know that I've been working on myself too. There's something I've been thinking about for a while." I raised an eyebrow, curious yet cautious. "What is it?" "I want to go away for a weekend, just the two of us. I think it could help us reconnect, to remind ourselves of why we fell in love in the first place," she suggested, her eyes hopeful. "It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, just a chance to step away from everything and focus on us." The idea intrigued me. A weekend away could be a chance to explore whether we could rekindle some of the old magic, but I was also hesitant. "I don't know, Sarah. I'm still processing everything. I'm not sure it's the right time." "Please just think about it," she pleaded, her expression earnest. "I want us to have a fresh start, and I believe that getting away could help us do that." After some back and forth, I agreed to consider it. The thought of escaping the chaos of our everyday lives felt appealing, but I was also acutely aware that it wouldn't erase the hurt. Still, I wanted to give us a chance, not just for her sake, but for mine as well. I didn't want to live in a state of perpetual anger and resentment. The following weekend, we headed to a cozy cabin in the woods, a place I had suggested before we fell into this turmoil. As we settled into the space, I felt a mix of nostalgia and anxiety. Would this be a healing experience or a painful reminder of everything that had happened? The first night was tense. We stayed up late talking, reminiscing about our early days together. I tried to let my guard down, but the shadows of betrayal loomed large. Sarah shared stories of her childhood, her dreams, and her fears. It felt like we were peeling back layers, but I still felt a part of me holding back, unwilling to fully let her in. The next day, we decided to go hiking. The beauty of nature surrounded us, the fresh air filling my lungs as I took in the sights. It was refreshing, a welcome distraction from the heaviness that had settled in our hearts. As we reached a viewpoint overlooking a breathtaking valley, I felt a flicker of the connection we had once shared. "Look at this," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "Isn't it beautiful?" "It really is," I agreed, feeling a warmth in my chest. For a moment it was just us, free of expectations and the weight of our past. I wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, to embrace this moment of clarity. As we stood there, I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Sarah, I need you to understand that while this feels nice, it doesn't erase what happened. Trust isn't something that can just be fixed, it's a process." "I know," she replied, her expression earnest. "I'm committed to doing the work, Mike. I want to show you how serious I am about rebuilding our relationship. I need you to let me in." In that moment, I felt a stirring of hope. Maybe there was a chance for us to move forward. I wasn't ready to fully forgive, but the walls I had built around my heart were beginning to feel less suffocating. I realized that this weekend could be a turning point for both of us, a chance to redefine our relationship on new terms. As we made our way back to the cabin, I felt a shift inside me. Perhaps healing didn't mean forgetting. Perhaps it meant learning to coexist with the pain and finding a way to move forward. I was still cautious, but I was also willing to explore the possibility of a future together, one that acknowledged our past while embracing the hope of what could be. That evening, as the sun set and the stars began to twinkle above us, we gathered around a fire. We talked late into the night, sharing stories, laughter, and even tears. The connection we had once felt began to rekindle, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the glimmer of something resembling peace. As the flames danced in front of us, I realized that while the road ahead would be challenging, I was open to the possibilities. Whatever the future held, I knew I had to stay true to myself, because at the end of the day, both Sarah and I needed to find our own paths to healing, whether that meant walking together or apart. The weekend at the cabin marked a turning point for both of us. As we returned home, I felt the weight of my heart lifting just a little. The connection we had rekindled around the fire provided a flicker of hope, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to erase the past. Trust is a fragile thing, and it takes time to rebuild, something I was finally beginning to accept. Once we were back in our day-to-day routine, Sarah continued to work on herself and our relationship. She initiated therapy sessions on her own and began journaling, openly discussing her feelings with me. I admired her willingness to confront her actions, and it sparked something within me, a willingness to explore the possibility of forgiveness. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but I felt a shift in my heart. We kept attending couples therapy, and each session encouraged us to dig deeper into our emotions. I learned to express my needs without fear of judgment, and Sarah learned to take accountability for her actions. As the weeks turned into months, we both put in the effort to change, and slowly but surely, the cracks in our foundation began to heal. One evening, while sitting on the couch together, I looked over at Sarah. She was laughing at something on her phone, a genuine smile lighting up her face. I felt a warmth in my chest, a sense of comfort that I hadn't felt in a long time. I realized I missed this version of her, the one who could laugh and share joy without the burdens of guilt weighing her down. "Hey, can we talk?" I said, my voice softening as I leaned closer. "Of course," she replied, her smile fading slightly. "I just wanted to say that I appreciate the effort you've been making." I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "I know it's not easy for either of us. I can see you're trying, and that means a lot to me." Her expression changed, a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over her face. "Thank you, Mike. It's been hard, but I want to make this work. I want us to be happy again." As I spoke, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. "I'm still scared, though. I want to believe we can rebuild, but it's not easy for me to let go of the pain." "I understand," she said softly. "I'm scared too, but I want to show you that I can be trusted again. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that to you." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "Let's take it one day at a time. We don't have to rush into anything. I want to feel safe in our relationship again." The conversation felt like a step forward, a deepening of our connection that was rooted in vulnerability and honesty. It was refreshing, and it lifted a weight off my shoulders. Trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight, but this was the starting point, an acknowledgement that we were both committed to the journey ahead. Through the months that followed, we continued to navigate the complexities of our relationship. I learned to embrace the present, focusing on the moments we shared rather than dwelling on the past. We took trips together, ventured into new activities, and even started a small garden in our backyard. Each day felt like a new opportunity to explore both our individual selves and the partnership we were trying to rebuild. Eventually, I found myself surprised by the moments of laughter that punctuated our days. A shared joke here, a spontaneous dance in the kitchen there. They felt like little victories, reminders that we could still find joy within our relationship, even after everything we had endured. One afternoon, as we tended to our garden, I turned to Sarah, watching her carefully plant seedlings. "You know, I think we're doing okay," I said, a smile creeping onto my face. She looked up, her eyes brightening. "Really, you think so?" "I do. We've both changed, and I feel like we're growing together. It's slow, but I can see the progress," I replied, a sense of pride swelling within me. Sarah smiled back, her face reflecting the sun's warm glow. "I'm so grateful for that." And in that moment, I realized something profound. I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I was reclaiming my life, one of resilience, healing, and hope. There would still be challenges ahead, but I felt ready to face them. I had grown stronger, forged anew in the fire of pain, and I was no longer afraid of the future. As we stood in our little garden, surrounded by budding plants and the fragrance of fresh soil, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I understood that life would always have its ups and downs, but at that moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. I had learned the importance of self-worth and the power of forgiveness, both for myself and for Sarah. The journey of healing is rarely a straight path, but it's the twists and turns that shape us into who we are meant to be. And as I looked at Sarah, I knew we had both come a long way. The road ahead was still uncertain, but together, we were ready to face whatever life threw our way.